Okay, hi guys, and welcome to today's show. Today we're going to be doing another cultural video, but something that the watch lovers and horology fans will certainly enjoy. And we're going to be looking at some of the most fantastic television shows from the last decade that feature heavily beautiful timepieces. So anyway, before we get into that, I should do my wristwatch check. It's about 90 degrees in here. I have to turn off the air conditioner. I haven't even turned it on yet today. It's getting to that stage where my shirt is sticking to the seat. Suddenly it's got really hot here in New York, so I've got my favorite summer watch out, which of course, so my wristwatch check today is my beautiful Squiley 1521. Those lovely summer colors. I kind of dressed it down in that navy blue from Wrist Candy Watch Club. But yeah, it always cheers me up when I bring this out. It's summer has definitely started. So, wristwatch check done. Let's roll the intro and get on with this video. Okay, welcome back guys. So, my three favorite shows containing wristwatches, or that have a lot of fantastic wristwatches in them. Now of course, these are my top three. If you have your own, please nominate them down in the comments. If I get a good amount of feedback from you guys, I will certainly look into them and maybe do a follow-up video to this particular episode. But anyway guys, yeah, please nominate your favorite TV shows. And it doesn't have to be in English. I've included one foreign language series in my top three as well. So we'll start right at the beginning, and quite fittingly, it's a show based here in New York on Madison Avenue, and that is of course Mad Men, and that's where the name comes from. Now, fantastic thing is, I don't know if you remember guys, but last summer there was an exhibition here at the Kaufman Astoria. There's the Museum of the Moving Image. It's about 5 or 6 blocks away from my house, and I actually went along. I couldn't film inside, it's a real shame, but I got to see all the watches featured in the show, and actually I posted one or two of them on my Instagram before the security told me off. I managed to sneak a couple in, but anyway, so I got to see a good amount of these watches in the flesh, which was of course fantastic. What is Mad Men about? As the name suggests, it's about the Madison Avenue advertising men of the 60s, and it progresses into the 70s as well. This started in about 2007, ended last year in 2015. Amazing show. I mean, follows mostly Don Draper and the kind of characters in his world. He's this very kind of troubled war veteran that steals someone else's identity and becomes this extremely talented advertising man in the city. He's a very suave, sophisticated guy, a womanizer, the man men want to be and women want to be with. So he's almost got a kind of James Bond quality about him. There is a kind of inner darkness there that is really enjoyable. Lens for good viewing. The writing is impeccable. I've got to say, it's some of the best writing I've seen in a long time. A lot of it is in between the lines. It's actually, let's have a look at it right now so you get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Every woman wants choices, but in the end, none wants to be one of 100 in a box. She's unique. She makes the choices, and she's chosen him. She wants to tell the world he's mine. He belongs to me, not you. She marks her man with her lips. He is her possession. You've given every girl that wears your lipstick the gift of total ownership.
So, what are the watches included in this? Well, Don Draper is probably the biggest watch wearer of them all. He's worn JLC Reversos, the Memovox, a beautiful 1966 Seamaster Deville from Omega. Of course, the Rolex Explorer. At the time, it was quite a big watch. All the watches featured in Mad Men tend to be smaller. Some of the other characters, one of my favourite characters is Roger Sterling, this silver fox, equally as womanizing, but he has some of the best lines in the entire show. He famously wears this beautiful little Tudor Prince. Those of you unfamiliar with Tudor, have a look. I'm a big fan of the Tudor Princes as well. It kind of echoes his sophistication as well with the, Tudor, as you guys know, is a brand based on the Tudor dynasty, the British royal family that ruled way back. Another watch of note is Pete Campbell's Hamilton Sputnik, which is a really cool piece as well. All these pieces are much smaller. These are mid-century sizes, so a lot more sophisticated, a lot smaller. And it's so well cast because it has an elegance of that age, and it's a very good watch casting, if there's such a thing. But I think there is. Television has got a lot more intelligent in the last few decades especially, and the wardrobe really researched and did an outstanding job for picking these watches for the characters. What I love about Mad Men is, well, actually you could say it's what I love about America as a whole. We've had so much unbelievably dumb, degenerate, awful, ghastly television. We think of Kardashians and all this absolute filth, really lowbrow, degenerate filth of the last decades, and then just when you think it can't get any worse, then suddenly the same machine. Bernardo Bertolucci described Hollywood and the American mainstream as a sausage factory, and just as you think it's all over, a series like this comes along and you're just reminded what everything that is great about this country, and it's capable of such rich, deep, profound, intelligent, also reflective of society, and so much social commentary. I mean, this is an age of civil rights, of JFK assassination and Nixon, Vietnam, all of this stuff going on in the background. America is able to deliver this stuff, this quality of entertainment. There's something for everybody, I guess. But anyway, before I turn it into an anti-Kardashian rant, I'll better switch the subject. So anyway, Mad Men, check it out. Absolutely fantastic. Lots more watches than the ones I've mentioned. Guys, if you have some favorites, please add them down in the comments. So, moving on. What is my second choice? Well, it's no surprise. I've been going on and on about it on the Facebook, and that is, of course, House of Cards. My God, what an outstanding show. Again, I'm totally hooked into it. It follows largely the Underwoods, or Frank Underwood is the main character, and Claire Underwood. They are this power couple. We follow his rise from, I think, of a chief whip, if I remember correctly, all the way to becoming president. His Machiavellian plotting and backroom dealings, and all the backstabbing and political intrigue and all the rest of it that got him there. He is really one of the greatest anti-heroes we've seen in a long time. In many ways there is a kind of Nietzschean, Zarathustrian Superman quality to him. In a strange way he does embody that Superman ideal that Nietzsche wrote about. Also a really fantastic book if you haven't read it. What I like about Frank Underwood is that in an age where a lot of people have become disillusioned with the political world or Capitol Hill and all the rest of it, even though he is to some extent kind of evil, he's a very lovable character. This of course is a remake of a classic British TV show. If you haven't seen the British original, check it out. It came out in the 80s. It differs a hell of a lot. It's not really so much about watches in that one, it's more about pinky rings. Because it's the British establishment, you have all these scheming Tory aristocrats as they literally murder their way into power. Underwood is deliberately a kind of, his initials FU, Frank Underwood, obviously a little comedic finger up to the audience. The original is a lot more about pinky rings and scheming aristocrats, those terrible scheming aristocrats. You can't trust them, can you? But anyway, it's a lot more kind of frightfully, awfully, those kind of people. In a way it's a bit darker and a little bit more murderous. Frank Underwood is still, he still gets his hands dirty. Find yourself cheering him on, which is really bizarre. Anyway, let's have a look at some of his most memorable lines. And these are, of course, from these kind of Shakespearean soliloquies that also was very key to the British original, and I'm so glad they kept that. It shows you his duplicity and his kind of, you get an insight of the steps he's making. He's all about playing the game. He's very power hungry. That's all he cares about. So these soliloquies really give you an insight. Watch him in action as he tears people down and maneuvers them to get what he wants. It's absolutely fantastic, but also lends for some of the most memorable lines ever. So anyway, let's have a quick look at that.
There are two types of vice presidents, doormats and matadors. Which do you think I intend to be? The only thing more satisfying than convincing someone to do what I want is failing to persuade them on purpose. It's like a do not enter sign. It just begs you to walk through the door. From the lion's den to a pack of wolves, when you're fresh meat, kill and throw them something fresher. Even Achilles was only as strong as his heel.
As you can see, some fantastic writing, absolutely captivating. You're just drawn in to this, to these anti-heroes. It's fantastic. I mean, we haven't seen an anti-hero this good since Tony Soprano. We really haven't. So what watches are in there? Well, this shot actually has caught a lot of flack for having a ton of product placement. Frank Underwood himself, he sports a whole load of IWC watches. You never really see him wearing anything other than IWC. At the beginning, there's a square IWC. I'm not quite sure of that particular model. Then he changes to the IWC Portorgese, which has kind of become his iconic watch. What I love is that the watches really are an extension of their character, even more so than Mad Men. Mad Men, they're just kind of the dressing, the final piece in the costume, whereas I think in House of Cards, they're an extension of the character. His IWC, you'll see it at the end of each day when he's you know, spent the day literally battling and all this political maneuvering and hard work that he's engaged in. At the end of the day, he puts his watch in this box near his bed. It's quite a nice little routine. It's an endearing little quality. I mean, a lot of us do the same thing. If you take off your watch, I tend to wear my watches in bed, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, equally well cast is Claire Underwood, his wife. You know, we got to remember that Frank came from nothing. He came from a very kind of rural, he's described it as a white trash background. Claire Underwood comes from money. She comes from a powerful southern family. In the United States, there isn't an aristocracy, but there is kind of old money. They don't have an aristocracy here. America is too young. It's too young of a country. But if America did have an aristocracy, Claire Underwood would certainly be one. She comes from that old money type family, a big plantation house down in the south, and she wears a Cartier Tank, which I've got to be honest, you know, I'm a mongrel myself. I'm half peasant, half toff. I'm not a full-blooded aristo, so to speak, but something I have noticed on that side of the family is a lot of the women, especially kind of those that are involved in the higher echelons of society, they tend to wear Cartier Tanks. Jackie Onassis was famously wore one. It's a watch that has a kind of elegance and old money feel to it. My wife is obsessed with it. It's the one that I'm going to buy her for her birthday this year. I'm in the process of actually, I've just finished saving for it. So Frank's watch is a very kind of new, it's modern, it's clean. Hers is a little bit more classy, a little bit more sophisticated, has that nod to the past. Another really notable watch is Doug Stamper's Breitling Navitimer, the 01 that he wears. Doug Stamper is this kind of, he's almost like a son to Frank, and he does a lot of the dirty work. I mean, you'll see him actually literally getting his hands dirty, murdering people, and I've got to be careful, I mustn't give any spoilers away, but it's odd. I thought that watch wasn't really cast well, because you know, he should have been wearing a Rolex Submariner. When you're beating people up, doing dirty work, getting your hands dirty, you want something that's water resistant, a little bit more water resistance, a little bit more tougher. Having said that, it is a beautiful Navitimer. He wears it well. He's worn it since from the very beginning all the way to the end. There is even an SKX right at the last season. Difficult to spot. If you can get a screen capture, please send it to me. I'll send you some straps or a free prize or something. There's an SKX. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost like 95% sure it's an SKX because of the crown. The SWAT team member wears it as before they raid a house in the very last season, so check it out if you can. What other watches? There's a few others I'm not going to go into, but guys, please share them down below. I off the top of my head, I kind of forget. If you liked it and you can't wait till next season, check out the British original. Totally different, but certainly worth checking out. Okay, so my third and last choice. Now, the previous two were both American shows. Wanted to add something from Europe, and I've got to include Romanzo Criminale. Now, this is a 2-series television show from Italy, and this follows the rise and fall of a gang or a crime family in Rome during the 60s all the way up until the 90s, and actually they are still in power today. Now, this came out in 2008, 2010. Unfortunately, I don't have any clips to show you because they're all with subtitles, but guys, this is one of the best gangster television shows ever. Forget The Wire, forget The Sopranos. This Romanzo Criminale is where it's at. My great uncle is actually in it, playing one of the bad guys. This is from my family back in Italy, and it's also a very personal story because it's something that affected my family directly, and is part of the reason why my father and mother moved back to the UK. In the 60s and 70s and in the 80s, there were 2 mafia wars, and also a lot of political assassinations. There's Brigate Rosse that were bombing and kidnapping politicians, which of course are a communist terrorist group. There was Terrorismo Nero, which is of course the fascists. And Italy was going through a really tough time. A lot, the police were shooting students off protesting, left, right and centre. A lot of my dad's friends got caught up in the violence and ended up dying. A lot of my uncle's friends got caught up in the violence around the drugs trade, because especially when heroin hit Italy in the 60s. Then of course there were 2 mafia wars where the mafia were actually bombing and killing judges, politicians, but the famous Giovanni, Falcone assassination. Everyone's seen The Godfather, everyone's seen the gangster films about the mafia here in New York and that kind of thing, but in Italy it's a lot more complex. I'm sure you've heard of the Cosa Nostra in Sicily, but actually the reality is in Italy there are 5 types of mafia. The Cosa Nostra is only one of them. And actually, right now, to this day, are probably the weakest. In Naples, there's La Camorra, which is probably the oldest form of mafia in the world. In Puglia, which is the heel, there's La Sacra Carona. In Calabria, there's the 'Ndrangheta, which are extremely violent, and they have links to the Mexican cartels. And then of course there's the groups in Rome, Banda di la Magnalia, which is what this Romanzo Criminale is about. In the 2 series, it's a perfect story arc. It goes full circle. The story's not over, it's still going on to this day. I mean, they just did the big Mafia Capitale trial in Rome. So what happens, this follows the story of a group of kids that grew up in this really, really poor neighborhood, Magnalia, and they basically, as the drugs start to come in, they get involved in that. They get involved with the government, who hire them to do political assassinations. They make a deal with La Camorra from Naples and La Cosa Nostra in Sicily, and they start basically taking over Rome and its drug trade. You see them as these kind of naive idiots, really. I mean, they're real screw-ups, and then you follow their rise until they've built this huge empire. What is great is the way watches echo this story. Anyway, so let's have a look at Romanzo Criminale. as I was saying, the watches really follow this story. They start off with just kind of street kids doing petty, you know, low-level crime, and they wear the watches that they could afford at the time, which 60s and 70s, these very rudimentary LED Casio, not Casio, the Pulsar. You know, you press the button and the red LED shows up. There's a Speedmaster in it. They started wearing the Rolexes, the Submariners, and as they become, you know, mafiosi and connected and start climbing the ranks of these organizations, you know, you get your typical drug dealer, gold Rolex presidents. I gotta say, Stefano Sollima, the director Stefano Sollima, is probably my favorite film director since Vittore De Sica. He specializes in this, I think he's kind of brought back neorealism, but in a more kind of stylish way. He's from Rome himself, and all his films are about Rome. Kind of working class, gritty, tough neighborhoods. In all of his productions, there's always watches, and I think he's a watch guy. In Sabura recently, the villain wore this huge gold Monte Grappa, this really ostentatious, gaudy thing. The good guys have less, you know, more understated watches, that kind of thing. There is a deliberate attempt, and you can see it in all his work, of watches being very well cast. I love the detail, and it makes, you know, watch fans like me enjoy it that much more. But anyway, it's an outstanding work. It really is highly overlooked. It's very funny. It's got that Italian sense of humor. There's a very endearing. One of my favorite scenes is when one of the main characters, Libanese, is whacked. All the top guys, you know, his friends, and it's really, I mean, when he's whacked, I'm not going to give too much away, but they whack him at the end of the first season, and the second season is really about revenge. The first season is the rise to power. Second season is about revenge and the downfall. There's a beautiful scene where they break into this restaurant. They make the chef cook this pasta for this funeral. And they just sit around talking and sharing memories, all eating this pasta. It's so Italian. I can't really explain it until you see it. But I'm also very proud of the film because, you know, obviously my family being in it, you know, they brought in my great uncle to bring some realism. I mean, my great uncle, he's a real top geezer back in the neighborhood where it's all filmed and set. So they brought him in to give the actors, you know, it's all in dialect, of course, so they speak correctly and they kind of know how to behave in the neighborhood, all this kind of stuff. So there is that realism. It's one of the best gangster TV shows. And don't get confused, there's a film as well. The film is excellent, don't get me wrong. There's, what's his name, Pier Francesco, I forget his name. But anyway, the film is amazing as well. Check it out if you have a chance. But the series for me is the best. Anyway guys, I'm going to leave it there. Those are my 3 picks for my favorite TV shows involving watches. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to add your comments, thoughts, queries, questions, all the rest of it down below. Your own nominations. I'd love to hear other TV shows that have great watches in them. If there's enough suggestions, I'll do a follow-up video. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, found it useful. It really does help. And of course, as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.
I've always loathed the necessity of sleep. Like death, it puts even the most powerful men on their backs.